I was actually, the time I did that the first time that you just saw, I went back there and went, what have I done? What came over me? Who am I?
At 78, Sally Field isn't holding back anymore. She's finally opening up about the 6 actors she really struggled with. And it's not your typical Hollywood rumor. These aren't just names on a list. They represent tough moments and complicated relationships behind the scenes. Sally's honesty gives us a rare glimpse into the highs and lows of her long career. It's a reminder that even stars face clashes and heartbreaks. Let's unfold why he had to feel that way 6 times towards 6 different actors. Burt Reynolds. Sally Field and Burt Reynolds were a picture-perfect couple on the surface. 2 major stars with undeniable chemistry, especially after appearing together in Smokey and the Bandit. But behind the scenes, their relationship was far more complicated, sometimes tender and loving, other times strained and painful. What started as an electric romance turned into a source of emotional turmoil, particularly for Sally, who has since spoken candidly about the darker aspects of their love story. Sally Field and Burt Reynolds met in 1977 on the set of Smokey and the Bandit. At the time, Reynolds was already a huge movie star, arguably one of the biggest sex symbols of the decade, while Field was just starting to shake off her Gidget and the flying nun image. For Sally, Burt represented glamour and power, a man who could take control of any room he walked into. He was charming, funny, and fiercely charismatic. Sally later described falling for him almost immediately. It was that kind of whirlwind connection that can make people lose themselves a little, or a lot. What looked magical from the outside was, according to Field, much more troubling in private. In her 2018 memoir, In Pieces, Sally pulled back the curtain on their 5-year relationship, and she didn't hold much back. She described Burt as controlling, emotionally distant, and at times, manipulative. While she was trying to grow as an actress and as a person, he often made her feel small. He criticized her appearance, wanted her to defer to him in both life and career decisions, and seemed deeply insecure about her success. She wrote that he was not without kindness or generosity, but his need for dominance ultimately left her feeling like she was suffocating. One of the clearest signs of trouble was how Reynolds treated her in front of others versus behind closed doors. In public, he praised her and propped her up like the perfect partner, but in private, Field says he would subtly diminish her. He didn't want her to be too independent, too ambitious, or too self-assured. And yet, that's exactly who she was trying to become. As her career took off, especially with films like Norma Ray, which earned her an Oscar, she was finally stepping into her own. But Reynolds seemed threatened by her evolution. Sally eventually realized that being with him meant sacrificing huge parts of herself. The relationship ended in 1982, and while Reynolds would go on to describe Sally as the love of his life, Field didn't feel the same. In fact, in later interviews, she expressed regret about the time they spent together. What really stung her was how Reynolds tried to manipulate the public narrative. In his 2015 memoir, Burt talked about their love affair as if it were an epic romance that just didn't work out. But for Sally, that version of the story ignored the emotional damage she endured. She said she didn't speak to him for the last 30 years of his life, not out of hate, but out of self-preservation. So, why did Sally Field come to hate Burt Reynolds, or at least harbor strong resentment? It wasn't because he was a bad man through and through. It was because the relationship brought out the worst in both of them, especially in him. She felt that he used his power and status to control her, to stifle her growth, and to maintain the upper hand. For someone like Sally Field, who had fought so hard to be taken seriously in Hollywood, That kind of emotional suppression was unforgivable. She admitted that she had loved him deeply, but also acknowledged that he was one of the most emotionally damaging relationships of her life. Herbert Ross. Sally Field has always been known for being thoughtful, honest, and fiercely protective of those she cares about. And nowhere did that side of her show more clearly than during the making of Steel Magnolias in 1989. The film, which brought together a powerhouse cast of women including Field, Julia Roberts, Dolly Parton, Shirley MacLaine, Olympia Dukakis, and Daryl Hannah, was supposed to be a celebration of female friendship and strength. But behind the scenes, things weren't nearly as warm and fuzzy. In fact, according to Field, a lot of the tension stemmed from one person, director Herbert Ross. And if there was anyone on that set Sally Field truly couldn't stand, it was him. Field has never been shy about expressing just how difficult Ross was to work with, and not just for her. In interviews and in conversations over the years, she's opened up about how Ross was very, very, very hard on Julia Roberts in particular. Roberts was still young and relatively new to Hollywood when she landed her role in Steel Magnolias, and instead of being welcomed and supported, she was met with constant criticism and micromanagement from Ross. Sally recalled how Ross would tear down Roberts's performance, question her talent, and make her feel like she didn't belong. It was harsh, unnecessary, and at times downright cruel. To say that Sally hated watching that unfold would be putting it lightly. She was already an experienced and respected actress by that point, and watching a young woman get emotionally crushed by a man in power hit a nerve. Sally was deeply protective by nature, especially toward younger women, and she made it her mission to support Julia and keep her spirits up. In interviews, Sally said the rest of the cast often circled around Roberts after tough days on set, offering comfort and reminding her that she was talented, that she did belong. That kind of behind-the-scenes sisterhood helped carry Roberts through the shoot. But Field never forgot the emotional damage Ross inflicted. What made things worse was that Sally already had a complicated history with Herbert Ross. They had worked together before, he had directed her in Punchline, and while they had a professional relationship, it wasn't exactly warm. Ross was known in the industry as a director who could be incredibly demanding, with a sharp tongue and little patience for actors who didn't do things exactly his way. For someone like Sally, who valued collaboration and emotional safety on set, that kind of attitude was grating at best and toxic at worst. It wasn't just that he was tough, it was the way he seemed to thrive on making people feel small. And Sally couldn't stomach that. It's telling that Sally has publicly reflected more harshly on Ross's behavior than almost any other director she worked with. That says a lot, especially considering how long her career has been and how many personalities she's dealt with. Her disdain for Ross wasn't about one bad day or one awkward moment. It was about a pattern of behavior, a fundamental lack of kindness and respect, especially towards someone as vulnerable as Roberts was at the time. Sally saw it for what it was, a man in power tearing someone down just because he could. Years later, when talking about the experience, Sally didn't sugarcoat anything. She didn't call Ross complicated or difficult but brilliant, like people often do in Hollywood. She just told the truth. He was mean. He was unnecessarily hard on Roberts, and it made the set a difficult place to be. That kind of honesty is rare, and it speaks to Sally's integrity. She wasn't trying to rewrite history to be more palatable. She wanted people to know what really went on, and how damaging that kind of directing style can be. And that's part of what makes her not just a great actress, but a deeply admirable person. Would you believe the next one was caused by a kissing scene? Tommy Lee Jones. The reality of working in the film industry, especially in high-pressure environments with big personalities, can be a whole lot messier. Take the case of Sally Field and Tommy Lee Jones. These two award-winning actors are undeniably talented, but when they worked together on the 1981 romantic dramedy Back Roads, sparks didn't fly in a good way. In fact, Sally Field has openly said that Tommy Lee Jones was her worst on-screen kissing partner, and it wasn't just because of the kiss itself. There was some serious bad blood behind the scenes that stuck with her for decades. Sally Field didn't mince words when she appeared on Watch What Happens Live in 2016. When asked who her worst on-screen kiss was, she immediately named Jones. But it wasn't some petty remark. She followed it up by saying he was probably just in a bad phase of his life. That's pretty telling. In Hollywood, where PR-trained actors usually dodge naming names, it takes a lot for someone like Field, known for her warmth and professionalism, to single someone out. Clearly, their time working together had left a bad taste in her mouth, literally and figuratively. Digging deeper into the Back Roads production, it's easy to see how things went sideways. The film, which was supposed to be a gritty yet endearing road movie about two broken people finding connection, never really worked. Critics panned it, and director Martin Ritt, who had a history of working with Field, later expressed disappointment in the final product. Some of that failure was chalked up to the script, but a big part of it was the lack of chemistry between the leads. That's right, Field and Jones just didn't click. And we're not talking about a mild difference in acting styles here. By all accounts, they really didn't get along. Jones was known for being intense, serious, and not the most approachable guy on set. Field, meanwhile, was coming off a string of strong performances and had a pretty collaborative, open-hearted approach to her work. The clash in energy was probably inevitable. But to Sally's credit, she didn't hold a grudge forever. Years later, when they were both older and more established in their careers, Tommy Lee Jones actually reached out to apologize. Field recounted the moment on the Ellen DeGeneres show, saying he told her he was sorry for how he acted during the filming of Back Roads. That kind of honesty is rare in the entertainment world, and it speaks to how much things had changed between them. Field accepted the apology, showing once again the kind of grace and maturity that's made her a beloved figure in the industry. Interestingly enough, their paths crossed again in 2012, when they both appeared in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. This time, there was no drama, just two seasoned actors giving powerhouse performances. In fact, both were nominated for Academy Awards for their supporting roles in the film. It felt like a full-circle moment. The two had started out as tense co-stars in a flop, but ended up sharing the screen decades later in a critical and commercial success. And this time, there were no jabs about bad kisses, only mutual respect. Shirley MacLaine. These two iconic actresses, both incredibly talented and fiercely independent, have had a relationship that's more complicated than cozy. While they've shared the screen, most memorably in Steel Magnolias, there's been tension simmering behind the scenes for decades. The reasons behind that tension are rooted in professional rivalry, personality differences, and just the natural clash that can happen when two strong-willed women are put in the same orbit. To understand why Sally Field might have harbored some resentment toward Shirley MacLaine, you have to go back to Norma Rae, 1979. This was a pivotal moment in Field's career. Her portrayal of a Southern textile worker fighting for labor rights not only marked a turning point in how audiences and critics saw her, it won her an Academy Award. But behind the scenes, it's been reported that Shirley MacLaine had also shown interest in that role. The details are a little murky, but there was enough industry buzz to create a sense of rivalry. Imagine finally getting a big break After years of being seen as the girl next door, only to have someone like McLean, a seasoned actress with a strong personality, looming over the opportunity. That kind of thing sticks with a person. Their working relationship didn't exactly smooth out over time. When the two starred in Steel Magnolias in 1989, the set was famously full of strong personalities, and McLean was reportedly one of the more dominant forces. Field, who had carved out a career by being emotionally raw and vulnerable in her performances, reportedly found McLean's energy to be a lot. The two had very different approaches to acting and very different ways of carrying themselves on set. McLean is known for being blunt, spiritual, and unapologetically eccentric. Field, on the other hand, is more introspective and guarded. That alone can create friction, even before egos, awards, and old wounds come into play. Field has never outright said she hates McLean, but in various interviews, she's hinted that working with her wasn't the easiest experience. There's a certain diplomatic tension in the way she talks about that time. They were respectful to each other, sure, but that doesn't mean they were friends. And in an industry where everyone is trained to smile for the cameras and brush off conflict, those subtle comments can speak volumes. It's also worth noting that both women were at the top of their game during a time when there wasn't a lot of room at the top for women. Hollywood was, and often still is, a competitive place, especially for actresses over 40. It's no surprise that McLean and Field, each fighting to keep their careers alive and relevant, might have viewed each other more as competitors than collaborators. In 2018, tweets made Sally and an actor viral because of an exchange of public call-outs. Was it hate or just a simple clash? James Woods. It's less about anything personal between them and more about their very different worldviews and public spats, especially on social media. James Woods is known for being sharp, intense, and outspoken, not just in his acting, but also in real life. He's never been shy about sharing his political opinions, which lean pretty conservative. On the other hand, Sally Field has built her career on empathy, kindness, and advocacy for social justice, especially women's rights. When these two worlds collide, things get messy fast. The biggest public moment where their differences boiled over happened back in 2018. Woods shared a false meme about David Hogg, a survivor of the Parkland school shooting who had become a prominent activist. Sally Field called him out on Twitter, clearly upset about the misinformation being spread. Woods fired back with a tweet that many people saw as mocking and dismissive. That exchange made it clear they weren't just disagreeing on politics. They were clashing on basic values like truth and compassion. What's interesting is that even when they both expressed condolences after the death of fellow actor James Garner in 2014, their messages showed just how different they are. Field's tribute was heartfelt and warm, while Woods's was more reserved and less personal. It's like their contrasting personalities and beliefs can't help but come through, even in moments meant for unity. It might not be hate in the purest sense, but it's definitely clear there's a lot of friction between them. Their very public disagreements show how two talented actors can end up on completely opposite sides of the fence because of politics and personal values. Dustin Hoffman. Sally Field and Dustin Hoffman are two legendary actors who have given us some unforgettable performances over the years. However, their working relationship was reportedly a bit rocky. Sally Field has spoken candidly about her experiences in Hollywood, and one name that comes up in some of her stories is Dustin Hoffman. While she hasn't exactly said she hated him in so many words, there have been hints that the vibe between them was tense during their time working together. The main source of tension, according to interviews and Sally's reflections, was Dustin Hoffman's intense and sometimes difficult personality on set. Hoffman is known for being a perfectionist and fully immersing himself into his roles, which can sometimes make him hard to work with. Sally Field, who is very open about how important respect and kindness are to her, found some of Hoffman's behavior challenging. She has talked about feeling uncomfortable around him at times because of his sometimes abrasive approach to acting and directing scenes. One specific story that comes up often is from the filming of Absence of Malice, 1981, where the two starred together. Hoffman reportedly had a strong need to control how scenes played out and could be very demanding. Sally felt that this made the collaboration difficult because it didn't leave much room for the other actor's input or feelings. She has mentioned that working with Hoffman required her to stand her ground and be confident in her own instincts, which wasn't always easy given his strong personality. But it's not just about personality clashes. Sally Field has also spoken about the subtle, unspoken tensions in Hollywood, especially in that era. Actors like Hoffman, who were at the top of their game, sometimes came across as intimidating or dismissive of others, particularly women. Sally, who has always been outspoken about the challenges she faced as a woman in the industry, probably found this frustrating. So it wasn't just personal differences, it was also about navigating a tough professional environment where power dynamics could be tricky. Are you a fan of Forrest Gump's mom too? Share us your thoughts in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel for more.